avoiding bad habits with these young dogs is as important as forming good ones. I think that's overlooked. And the hard part about that one is, and I got an example, like my dogs aren't allowed on the furniture. We just don't do it. But the other day, Lillian didn't feel good and asked Mom, could I cuddle with Makina? Well, of course, you're not feeling good. Let's get the blanket out and we'll put you on here. That night, I woke up, went to the bathroom, came out, looked on the bed and saw Makina's gone. What happened to Makina? She was curled up nicely on the couch sleeping. One time. One time it took. So how come that doesn't work for the good stuff? I want to know that. Because I got to do the good stuff 1,000 times to get it to be 10% consistent. So, but you got to keep in mind, avoiding the bad habits altogether is oftentimes the most effective training we can do. Dogs will find themselves in bad spots, but so will kids. And so a lot of the things that we do is we set them up for success. Well, the problem is a lot of times we set them up to fail. So we have to look at that big picture and be like, that's the idea that they're always learning, we're always training. So if you look at it that way, it changes your mindset into, instead of setting aside 10 to 15 minutes to train with the dog that day, you don't have to set any time aside, because every time you interact with them, it's an opportunity for them to learn. And maybe sometimes the best learning is, don't do the wrong thing. So now all of a sudden when we start thinking about it that way, dog training just became really easy. You don't even have to set time aside to do it. I brought, when Lillian came home from the hospital, I didn't look at Steph and go, oh man, I'm going to have to work till 5:15 to 5:30. That's when we'll train Lillian. I'll set that time aside. Oh, I got that 8-week-old puppy. How much time do I need a day to do it? Oh, just short periods of time. Oh, good, it's only 10 minutes a day. I'll do that when I come home in the evening. Oh, I missed it 3 days in a row. That's all right. Saturday I got off. I'll work her half day on Saturday. No, they don't do it that way. So it's such an ongoing, constant thing that if you look at it that way, you actually look at it and go, I don't even have to train the dog today because I've been training it all day. It's totally how it's your approach to it, mentally as much as anything. Incremental training, we've talked about it. You're building off of stuff. I think of my sessions with the dogs, and I always think back a session or two, and I'm always thinking forward a session or two, and I'm always trying to realize it's all built off of what we just did is dictating what we're doing tomorrow. And how she did. Because I can plan it out. Your Walters book will tell you what you should be doing on week 3, week 4, week 5. But if the dog didn't do what it was supposed to do in week 4, you can't go on to week 5. But the book says we're supposed to. It's week 5. That dog doesn't watch the calendar. He doesn't care about the watch. That takes a completely different mindset than what we're used to operating in every day. Because I got a calendar I have to follow, and I have a deadline, and I have to pick up kids at this time, and I have to do all that stuff. That dog, it's not its world. So the incremental part of it, just because this says I go to this at this age, means nothing. The dog dictates the next step. The dog dictates when to slow down. And sometimes I push it a little bit to see. And then the dog will tell me, are you going fast enough or should you slow down? So there's this idea of like, when should you move on? As long as you understand that when you move on, you don't leave where you were. You're going to watch a video here later where they talk about squares. And he says, when do you leave square one and go to square two? And the answer is you don't. You pick square one up and you bring it with you. It's the same thing with dogs. The phases of the dogs is important, and you guys are all very close in phases. And I think you can measure it with some ways. Teething is one. I think dogs go through some maturing with the teething process. I think it's a physical part, but I also think it really relates to some of the mental stuff. Pre-teething is like a phase. Post-teething, I feel like you're starting to get into some of this stuff where you see them. You see different opportunities with them because I think they're just capable of a little bit more. That's a very broad general statement, but somewhere between 4 and 6 months is when most of them are going to teeth. I see that as a big part of it. Hold conditioning for me is a part of it in a retriever training. You get past hold conditioning, it's like the floodgates are open and what you can do is just about endless. Prior to it with some dogs, it's really a pins and needles thing because you're just not sure if they're going to retrieve it reliably. Prior to him having the confidence that the dog was going to deliver it every single time, Brian doesn't even think about it anymore. He might remind the dog every once in a while, here, and the dog's right there like a robot. He's been brainwashed to bring it and deliver it every time. Go get it, bring it back. Go get it, bring it back. You're going to see us do some demonstrations. Our dogs aren't going to fool around. They're not going to spit bumpers. They're not going to toss them around. They're not going to leave them into. They pick something up. They can't do anything but come back to you. And so when you're training a retriever, if every time you send the dog for a retrieve, you hope he comes back with it, do you know how hard that is to live? Oh. Once you get past that, do you know how confident you become? Do you know how strong you feel when you don't have to worry about any of that stuff? It's the last thing on your mind. Then you can start worrying about the stuff that really matters. How do I get him there? How do I help him to find this dummy? Set up a blind. Like now you're getting into some complicated stuff. You can't even touch the tip of the iceberg on that stuff if you're not sure that the dog's going to bring it back. So hold conditioning. Now I used to say that every dog would need it to some degree. I trained a dog named Blue. I sold it to a friend of mine. I never hold conditioned him. He's got the most reliable delivery of any dog I've ever trained. From day one, I never let him have a sloppy delivery. He always had a good, he had it naturally and I brought it out and emphasized it. And because I never let him create a bad habit, he never had a bad habit. Oh, is that fun? But I've become a lot better at preparing those dogs to not have the issue in the first place. Don't treat symptoms. Avoid the sickness altogether.